Alright guys, so let's go ahead and get started with Formic, which is, it handles validation, submitting, and default values. It's a great form framework for React, and I believe to date it's the only form framework that I've used, or library, in React. And so what we need to do is bring up our terminal, and I'm going to Control C out of there, and I'm going to run npm install -- save FORMIK. And this should find Formic, the library that we want to use here, and install it. So I guess while that's installing, I can start writing the code and show you guys what it looks like. So let's jump back into here. And in the contact form itself, this is what's going to change. So we're going to go right down to the bottom of the folder here, or the file rather, and we're going to need to wrap the contact component with Formic. So what we're going to do is at the very top here, we're going to import in curly braces with capital F ORMIK, so with Formic, from, and then all lowercase, Formic. Now let's go back to the bottom of the file here, and this is going to be basically what we need to do is we need to create a new kind of function. We're going to export the default here. We're going to wrap this component. So I'm not sure if we've covered wrapping components. Basically, you can kind of modify, it's kind of like a decorator that modifies your component before it exports it. So we're going to wrap this in a function called with Formic, the exact thing that we exported, or that we imported at the top here. And for now, just go ahead and open and close a bracket. And then once this is done, you're going to open a bracket before where it says contact. And you're going to, at the end of where it says contact, you're going to put another bracket. So it looks a little strange. I know it's the way it's done though. And then inside the with Formic function, we're going to open and close curly braces and then drop down a line so that we have a good place to write, I guess. So now there's three main things that we want to write in this with Formic object, I guess. The first is going to be map props to values. So map props to values. It's camel case. And this is going to be a function. It's going to return an object. So for this, you can just open regular brackets after the arrow, and then curly brackets. So inside these curly brackets, this is an object, and this is what we're going to specify our property names, basically. So our form fields. So name, and we're just going to set them all to blank strings for now. Phone, and then message. There we go. And then after this one, after this object here, you can put a comma, and we can write other, oh sorry, not after that. It's after the actual bracket, you're going to put a comma, and we can continue to build out this object. So we're going to say validate, and we're going to set this, we're going to take in values to this function, and then use an arrow function to copy that over here. I spelled that wrong, validate. Okay, so what we need to do here is define const errors, and it's going to be an empty object. And then if, let's say, so name is required. So if no values.name, actually we can map through these. So, okay, yeah. So let's do this the easy way, shall we? There's always more than one way to do something. So if we think about the values object here, this is an object, and when I hover over it, you can see name, email, phone, and message are the values in there. Those are the keys in the object. So what I'm going to do, since they're all required, we're going to map over the keys. So object.keys, and we're going to pass in values to the keys method, and then we're going to map it, and we're just going to take v, I guess, as a parameter in here. If values dot, or not dot, so we're going to use square brackets here because we're using a variable to try and access the value in an object. So if values, say if no value, then what we need to do is set errors square brackets v. So this could be errors name, errors email, is going to be equal to required, and then outside of this map function we're going to return the errors. And then one last property for this object is going to be handle submit. So handle submit, and we're going to capture the values. We're going to open up brackets here because we're also going to capture set submitting from the props, and then we're going to use an arrow function here to basically do whatever we want. So this would be called when the form submits. So I'm just going to alert you've submitted the form. So I'm going to save this, and these are the three, and you could validate this however you want to. So if you wanted to check if something is a number, and it's supposed to be, you could use the isNaN function, but we're not going to really discuss that here. What we're going to do here, we do need to make a change to the field here. So we can actually delete the entire state and constructor. Get rid of those. We no longer need those. I'm going to save this here. And then what we need to do is set the value, or rather the name here. Okay, so before we do that, let's set the, let's get rid of the value in onChange. We're not using the state anymore. And I'm going to save it. And then inside the field component, we are going to write name. So value in onChange, let's get rid of that. And let's replace it with a property called name equals this.props.name. I'm going to copy this over to here, save it, And then if we go back to our terminal, we're going to run npm start. And it's going to recompile our application and open up a new tab in the browser. And now if we go to contact, if I go and inspect, and we go into React, go up to contact, we can see all of these now are new properties, and that's because we wrapped it with Formic. So if we look for values, we see that none of these are actually being set as values. So let's try and figure out why. So there's no onChange, but well, I guess we should, okay. Let's go ahead and actually fix this. What we're going to do is, in the field here, we're going to set it equal to values. This props values, and then a handle change event as well on it. It's going to need the name property because that's what Formic hooks into to differentiate fields. So let's go ahead and set value equal to this dot props dot values, and then in here we're going to use field dot name. The name itself, I guess, so field dot name, and then on change we're going to use the this dot props dot handle change, and we're going to save this. And on the field itself, let me check first. Let's go ahead and open React and just see what's going on here. Value, yeah, still not getting set. Okay. So let's go ahead and in here, let's say on change is going to be this dot props dot on change, and the same for text area. So let's save that. And now when we change the input, see if this is picking up the change. So I'm going to go into the contact component, and yes, it is. Now values is being set through here. Now there's also touched and let me see here. Here we go. So we can see that nothing is set here when we did touch the message input field. And so what we need to do is on blur, we can set touched to true just by calling the built-in function onTouched or on blur. So this again is passed in by the Formic wrapping of this component. So what we're going to say is on blur this dot props dot handle blur, and then in field we're going to say on blur this dot props dot on blur. Yes, that's what we named it. And we're going to copy this again to the text area, save. And now when I go into this element here, the text area, I'm going to select contact component, and then I'm going to look in here in this touched array, and when I blur from that, it should get set, but it's not. And that is odd. On validate, let's see if we have any. I mean, we could call set touched, but I shouldn't have to when I'm blurring it correctly. So let me look in this one here. Okay, so touched is still empty. So let's have a look here and see what's going on. On blur, this dot props dot on blur. I didn't save this component. Okay. So now when I do this, we will see, if I go into React and go up to contact and select touched, we can see that it's true. So this is useful for validation. If there's an error, we want to be able to check if touched and if error, which is up here. We can see that all of these are required and all of them are blank. So those values for the errors are getting set initially, and that's why we need to check if touched and if errors. So let's go ahead and do that. In the field component, well actually let's say touched, and we're going to just check if this element has been touched. So we're going to open up brackets here, and we're going to say this dot props dot touched, and then field name, and errors is going to be this dot props dot errors, and then square brackets field dot name. Now I'm going to save this, and in field itself now I'm going to drop this down, and we're going to say if this dot props dot touched and this dot props dot errors, we're going to print out this field. Actually, I need to return this, or use a span. This field is required, and save. And now the errors should all exist right now because all of the fields are blank and they should not be blank. However, touched is not set on any of them because I haven't touched any of them. So when I touch this and start typing, well, now if I erase that and tab to the next field, it's going to properly set that field as touched, which is exactly what we wanted. So now let's go ahead and fix that field. And that's fine. That's a weird email address, but I'm cool with that. And then, okay, so our form works. We're getting all of the values to it. And then when I submit it, it's still calling our initial function. So what we need to do is, in the contact form itself, we're going to delete this. And there's a property handed into our wrapped contact component that is called handle submit. So I'm going to delete all of this, and I'm going to call this dot props dot handle submit. I'm going to save it. And now our handle submit function is going to get called. And what we're going to do is we're going to JSON dot stringify values. And I'm going to save this. And now I should be able to go through here and type, this is my message, and when I hit send, it says you've submitted the form. But it didn't print out the JSON stringified version of values, so let me just console log values, and I'm going to precede that with the word values so that I can be sure which console statement is trying to print it out. And then going to hit send. And I guess the alert doesn't like JSON stringified objects anymore. It used to. I'm not sure why. In any event, we have values printing out here, and so here is where you would be able to actually communicate with a server to send out an email or what have you once the form is submitted. So as you can see, we just wrote a lot of logic using Formic, and we didn't have to do that much. And so going through this course, when we get to other things, we're mostly going to be using Formic for forms, and it's really just, it's a great form library, and it does everything we need it to really simply. We don't have to really worry about, any type of extensive manual validations or, whether a field is touched or not, and we don't have to work with the state either, which is kind of neat. So I'm sure we'll talk, maybe in the next video, maybe another time, but we'll talk about more advanced validation schemes, because there is a library called YUP, Y-U-P, and it handles validation really intelligently, and you can even set conditional validations. So we'll get to that at some point. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.